Okay, Maggie, are you totally frozen?
Yes, you hit record and my computer froze. That's great. Okay, hello, noticers, and welcome to a very exciting episode for me. I think we say that every time, but I'm actually super excited to talk to you this time. We have here Katie Henricks, who is a certified life and relationship coach with a background in education and human sexuality. And Katie's main focus is, I would say, transformational. Um, as of right now, like your focus seems to be mostly on women and helping them to transform into more of like an embodied whole um, female, like reclaiming their feminine power, if you will. And I love that. And I would love to hear if there's anything you want to just add to that in terms of like where you're at right now and what you're offering as a coach.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I've been working with women for about 10 years, and I've had my business for about 6 years. I celebrate 6 years in June, so I'm really excited about that. Um, and yeah, I'm a certified life and relationship coach. I work exclusively with women with relationships, body image, and sexuality. So that's a really big, broad spectrum, because those are the issues we have really hard time talking about, and we don't bring them up
Mm.
to our gynecologist or to our therapist or to our best friends. But somehow a stranger on the internet who knows her shit is like the safe place. And
Yeah.
so women have been coming to me kind of slowly but surely over the past 6 years, and we've explored, all of those secret little boxes that we keep kind of stowed away that really impact the way we do relationships and ultimately the way that we feel about ourselves as women, what we feel like we deserve. It affects our self-worth. It affects our expectations, our standards. It affects our level of self-respect. And so I really get in there and I work with clients on like core beliefs, some childhood stuff that could have formed um, a belief system that keeps on sabotaging you and your relationships, or keeps you from advocating for yourself, not only emotionally or with boundaries in a real relationship, but like in the bedroom also. We kind of shut down there too. And so I work with women. Like one of the themes that comes up quite a bit is like, when it comes to sex, I just shut down. I don't
Mhm.
know, why. Like, why can't I achieve orgasm? Why can't I feel like embodied? Why do I feel so disconnected? I feel like I kind of freeze. And so that is when we're talking specifically about sexuality, that's one of the parts that I see come up again and again with clients. Um, and there's such a sisterhood in the way that coaching has emerged for me that I'm so grateful for. My clients are like my sisters. I become invested in their success and their nourishment and their fulfillment and their lives. And it's the most rewarding job in the world. So,
Oh, and I feel as though, I know Katie and you shared, I think you even had like your own way of working and who you worked with shifted. Like there's a story, stories there too. I know you used to just work with men, and I
I
want
did.
to kind of hear from you about that too. But
Yeah.
I also, just the topics that you are talking about that are really massive, yet I feel like are just so critical and like so right now, at least they're like gaining some conversational aspect in mainstream. And I imagine, for you as not only like a coach, but are such you do such a good job of like vulnerability and storytelling from your perspective on your platforms. And I think it's so educative, like to be out there doing that. So I love like how you work with women and people, individually, but then I also know like you're doing such of that, like so much of that work in how you show up on your platforms to talk about this more broadly so that even those who can't work with you intimately, like they can still have a place for exploration. So I want to talk about like both of those as well.
Mhm.
And I know Maggie and I have some like also questions. I hope we can get to all of it. But like I would love to hear that story too from like how your story, like how things have migrated and changed for you for
Oh my God. I love my story. It's such a ride. Okay, so I think all of this happened, and I'm going to credit this company or this modality for waking me up. I think everyone has a wake up moment where they were like, what have I been doing my whole life? Maybe it's like coming back to a memory that's really deeply affected your your sense of self or who you are in relationship. Maybe it's waking up and saying, I am in the wrong relationship.
mm,
And that was one for me. So I walked into a S Factor class. Sheila Kelly, who was a former, well, she's an actress now too, but she started a company called Sheila Kelly's S Factor, and it was like this hot thing in Los Angeles where all these like hot turned on women would go and pole dance and learn feminine embodiment, and we practiced sensual feminine movement, and it was like this mix of kundalini and like workout and pole, and then also we did a lot of like sensual and feminine embodiment exploration around our sexuality or sexual expression. And it was such a private and um like uh like an aha moment for me. I just remember sitting in that room. The lights were super low. I loved my teacher. The music came on, and I was like, "Oh my God, what is this?" And I remember like walking out, just like dripping in sweat, and being like, "That was like church. What in the fuck was that?" And so I got pregnant. I was married at the time. I got pregnant. I danced my way through my pregnancy as a student. Then when my son was born, when he was about a year old, I took their teaching certification program for about a year, became an S Factor teacher, taught for like 5 years. Was wonderful. It was a wonderful, beautiful part of my life. Netflix created a documentary about it. Um, uh, what is it called? You'll see it if you search in Netflix. Something like um, drop, strip down, and rise up. I think that's it. Strip down, rise up. And so I taught there for a while, and I just knew that it was something that there was something more there. There was so much more there, and so I got into like the sexuality arts. I started to take a lot of courses with like Om Rupani and um, just a bunch of different like little programs and workshops and kink workshops. I was just deeply interested in it. It felt so fun. Um, and I got a divorce. I got a divorce and I woke up to, oh my God, I am in an abusive relationship. I was afraid that I would end my own life. It should have been the happiest time of my life. My son was little, he was healthy. On paper, we were great. And then behind closed doors, it was an absolute disaster. And I called a therapist one day, and I couldn't even get words out of my mouth because I was so destroyed. I didn't even realize that I was in like a psychologically and emotionally abusive relationship because I was that like brainwashed at the time. And um, it was preceded by about 6.5 years of the most tumultuous, soul breaking divorce process I think very few people live to tell about. I hate to be dramatic about it, but it really was like I gained 100 pounds, if that tells you anything about the level of um, disorientation and stress and trauma that occurred during that time. And in the meantime, I got certified as a life relationship coach because I knew that there was something emerging far beyond just what was happening in that moment. And in the midst of this, kind of as things were settling down, I started my business. And when I started, I was like, okay, I'm licensed. Like, let's do this. People are just going to like flow in. And it was crickets. And I was like, okay, this is a humbling experience. Now what? And I still had my sales job at the time. I was working for this. Just no, just hard no. I'll never work for men again. I'll put it that way, and not because I'm some staunch feminist, but because um, I uh, I care too much about the feminine experience in business. Um, and there's something that just, anyway, I'm so happy that I left. I was able to leave there. And in the first year, I made $12,000. And I was like, it's the most money I've ever made in my life, because like before that, my ex-husband was the breadwinner, right? And so like I would bring home, like a couple $100 a week or a month or whatever, because I was a mom, um and never really developed a sense of purpose that supported my self-worth, that supported my family monetarily, that created a foundation for me to live a dream, that supported my goals, that was able to put money in the bank. And I was like, $12,000 to me is like, oh my God, something amazing is going to happen. And so I started a program working with men. So I was like, men love me. Like, I wasn't as heavy as I am now, and I think that had something to do with it, and I'm great with men. I knew how to coach men from working in my coaching program, and it just wasn't satisfying for me. Like 3 of the men that I worked with went on to get married, get in relationships, have babies. I still talk to them to this day. I love them. I'm so proud of them. And I knew I could work with men because I had strong enough boundaries that I knew how to coach them without, like, even if they came, my biggest fear at that time was like, what if they try and cross the line with me? I never want to be that coach who blurs that line. And I think then that was like a testament to like, oh, I'm serious about this. Like if I have that ethical boundary and it's important to me right there, then I know that there's something really here for me professionally. And I did it, and it was great, and it was fulfilling. And then I realized that the only reason why I wasn't working with women, because I wanted to so deeply, is because I was terrified. I was so afraid of women. And it like hit me. I was like, I've done all this work with S Factor. I've seen women in their most vulnerable, like in a puddle on the ground, exploring their emotionality in these like really vulnerable spaces. I'm like, I shouldn't be afraid of women. What is this spot? And it was because I felt like a fraud. I'm like, am I good enough? Am I good enough to coach a woman and to hold? What if she comes for me? What if she tries to like drag me for a mistake I make? What if, because we're human, we make mistakes. Even the best therapists in the world make mistakes. We have a little misstep. And my fear was like that they would see through me, or they would see that like I was deeply insecure, or that I would be judged, or that I would judge them. And all of these fears started to come up. And then I had my first client, and I fell in love with her. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm actually working with her again now, 6 years later. We did work together. And like one of her dreams, one of her goals when we first started was, she was like, I want to get married. I want to have babies. I want to be a mom. And I've never been valued in a relationship, not the way that I wanted to. My biological clock is ticking. I want to have babies. I want to feel what it feels like to be a mom. And we coached for several months, and now she's pregnant with her 3rd little boy and married, and she's starting her like pre and postnatal coaching business. And it was in that moment when I started coaching with her and another incredible woman that I was like, I can do this. Work with women. And for a while there, I was like, I'll work with men too. If like a client's husband wants to work with like both of us, and we can come up with like really wonderful exercises, and we can have sessions and whatever. And we did that a little bit. And it was great. It was wonderful, very fulfilling, but it wasn't quite the spot for me. And then a couple years ago, I was like, I'm going hard at like just women, only women. This is who I can help. This is who is gravitated toward me. And one of my amazing teachers, she's like, you can't, I tried to tell her earlier on, I was like, I want to attract like this type of woman. And she's like, oh, honey, you can't ever control who comes to you. You just have to see, you have to put yourself out there in the fullness of your expression, and then who comes in. It's kind of like attracting a man, right? Like you kind of like see who you are in the reflection of who's attracted to you, and you're like, ooh, this is cool. And so we did that. I built that, and slowly and steadily, and there have been a lot of dark days. There have been super dry months. There have been fruitful months. And Wednesday morning, I woke up to like 2 or 3 super viral videos on TikTok, and like almost 300 submission forms to work with me. And that was after 6 years of hustling my ever loving ass off. And yeah, I mean, I have like the person I was on Tuesday night and the person I was on Wednesday morning are 2 totally different people in business.
Wow.
I appreciate the thing that there's so much that you just said, and thank you for sharing. And the thing that is just like I found so interesting, and I'm glad that you said it, and I wonder if this resonates with you, but the fear of women and finding it easier to sell your, like present yourself to men is so real because, you know, at least from my own experience and my own relationship, body image, sexuality things, like I've constantly perceived myself through the lens of men, right? So I was like always constantly like, what do men think of me? And so it almost makes sense that that conditioning is like, this feels normal to present myself. Right now I have a business is not me, but it kind of is, right? Like presenting it to a man felt,
Yeah.
I don't know, like, did it just feel like the, you know, like easier thing to do? Like, what was it about the fear of women? Like,
Yeah. Okay.
you know?
This is a great, great question. 2 things. One is that I am the type of person who, when I'm feeling insecure, I will use sexuality, or have used sexuality as a crutch to connect.
Yeah.
Because it is a place in my life that I have cultivated so much strength and so much confidence and so much knowledge and so much comfort in. And also a little shadow there that I discovered right about then was like, I am not attracting what I want in my life because sexuality is a cover for being more vulnerable and standing fully in my self-worth as a woman from the standpoint of my character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Like I have sexuality like written all over me. Like you can feel it like but like outside of the room. There's nothing more I have to do to prove that or to show that or to use that as a manipulation tool. It's simply me. And I've learned through the years not to lead with it, and it's infinitely more powerful.
Well, it's so interesting because I feel like I have the reverse issue. So that is like, I've been kind of saying that because when I launched my business and my work, and I think like I fully, you know, listeners, I fully like showed up to this conversation and I was like, I don't think I feel like I've explored sexuality. I go like down every path of self-exploration there is. And I think that's one that I haven't gone deep into, but I like am not unaware of like, you know, it's immense influence and necessity in our lives, right? It's like, it's just odd. And I'm even like in the phase of right now through this conversation, but even in preparation for us talking and bringing this like topic to our podcast, this episode, I was like thinking about it. I'm like, what is that like about? You know, why are you not looking at it? And I probably look at it more like we were talking offline that I want to bring it back here too is about like the stages of sexual exploration. But I wonder where I am in that. And I would love, you know, Katie, for you to kind of comment on that, like how you see those phases. But it's as you guys are talking about this, I'm like, well, there has been something so powerfully positioned in me that has said like, almost like I can only care about women. And it's not from like where I hear you saying, Katie, which is it is like I saw the clearing, I saw it as my purpose. Like for me, it was almost like I think it's like a self-protection tool, like what you were saying about the manipulate. Like I feel like I could have used it and I was so careful to see like how I'm perceived at a really critical condition. Like, you know, my 20s were such a like impactful point in my life where I always considered that. And because I might have been objectified, I felt this real resistance to like being seen as any expert or any person that could like support men, which is so fascinating. Because when I launched my business, I do leadership coaching, and I know you know, but like specifically for women, women of color. And when I launched my business, I would talk about it, and I would talk about it with like a group of men. They were like, well, I need that. And I'm like, you do? And I somehow like just blocked it out completely. And even my husband would be like, why do you feel like you have to limit? Like, why do you feel like it only has to be like, is it from a position of purpose, or is it from just like you are like, that's the only lane I can be in? And he's like, don't you think that's like playing small, like small for yourself? Like, cause you could help so many people. And as you guys talk, I'm like, well, interesting, because that manipulation piece is such a key, like the reason almost why I'm like, nope, I won't go there.
Well, I think there are a few different things that you touched on, but really the thing that came through was like the way that ego can come um
Mm-hmm.
and like, okay, so I think that so I think the ego like does one of two things. It either makes us small to protect us, or it makes us big to protect us. And so the difference between you and me, Urvi, is like my ego made me really big.
Yeah.
But
That's a sorry, I really wanna
yeah.
highlight that because that is like such an important piece of my own journey. Mine's always made me small to protect
Mm-hmm.
me, but it has made me small to protect me. Like I can look back and like criticize myself for the ways in which I felt lesser than, but it did keep me safe because you know, and it specifically with men, like I was always feeling not attractive enough to have worth to men. So it kept me out of certain like dynamics. Like so even when thinking about working with men, it would be like, oh, am I attractive enough to even attract like to even like have men consider me, you know, and it so it all came back to my appearance, and then that translates into sexuality as well, right? Like my own personal, and you mentioned this, Katie, in the beginning, like in terms of disconnection during sex with clients, it's like a huge thing of like all during a lot of sexual experiences. It's just like, how am I looking right now, rather than how am I feeling right now? And that's like, you know, my whole I'm 36 years old and I'm still working through it. I've actually been, and I'm just going to go quick. Like I've had to like disconnect fully from men, and it's been 2 years of celibacy intentionally because I was like, I need to reclaim this, whatever's happening here with me. Like the men, like I'm disempowering myself, and I can see that because like I can see the ways in which I've been conditioned to outsource my power, and it's been a lesson. I'm still learning, but like all of this is just like it's also you know intertwined, you know, in the ways in which we are brought up. But I just love that piece that you have said about the ego because I think it's something that like
Mhm.
people judge themselves for, but at the end of the day, like you said, it's protecting you.
Yeah.
So yeah, all that.
Isn't that crazy? And it
Yeah,
and I see like some so if someone is watching this and they're like, well, how does an ego make us big and how does an ego make us small?
yeah,
This is a point that I talk about with women a lot. And so it can go one of either way. And so the ways that, and I think you were touching on this, the ways that ego can make us small is by giving us um like it's rooted in those beliefs that we're not enough, that we're unsafe, that we need something to validate us outside of ourselves, and be more worried about what other people think about us instead of what we think about them. So the skill of practicing discernment
Mm-hmm.
comes in, right? And really like, are you brave enough to step into your self-worth? That is a terrifying concept. And so those are all the things that you'll touch on if you're one of the women whose ego makes small. Also, making small is like a freeze response, a loss of advocacy or a loss of your voice in the relationship and in the bedroom. So you'll find yourself becoming more and more codependent in that, um, more and more people pleasing in that space as well, or more and more like feeling unworthy. Um, Decentralizing the male gaze is something we're talking about in my program Boudoir right now, because we're practicing like feminine ritual and cultivating like sanctuaries in our home, like in our bedrooms. And I have a lot of women who will come to me and say, like, I don't, they think that we're about to study sexuality so that their husbands think they're sexy again.
Mm.
And that's where I was when I started S Factors. Like, I started it so that my husband would be like, oh my God, you are the most beautiful, wonderful woman in the world. I want to ravage you. And I never got that moment. And then I realized it's never about that moment. It's never about what we feel under the male gaze,
Yeah.
right? Some of the ways the ego makes us big is through entitlement, through arrogance, through superiority, through being the expert. Had to really work on that one. Um, I'm with a man and we want to explore, like in the past, if we wanted to explore sexually, it's like, let me show you what I know. And I'm like, ugh, that is like not a good look.
Yeah.
And very much like you, Maggie, like I've had to have sobriety around sex, and it's
Yeah.
okay and it's needed. You know,
Yeah.
celibacy is absolutely a part of discovering a healthy sexuality and our sexual identity.
Yeah.
So, will you then speak to kind of these like stages of, sexual exploration, or sexuality exploration, I guess, is really what I'd like to phrase that as.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, I feel like we could talk about this for a few hours, but where I was coming from when I mentioned that comment before we started was like, um, I think when we first start to go into a sexuality journey, let's just like call it that for the sake of understanding it, or like, hey, maybe I should study this a little bit more, is we're like letting go of the pendulum. And it's like somewhere, right? It's either over here in like hyper presentation mode and yeah, presentation or provocateur.
Mm.
Let's call it that. Okay. The super amped up, hypersexual, the ones who use like sex all over the internet and all in their relationships. And they're like, why am I with the wrong guy? Those kinds, right? So that's like the provocateur. And she's hard, she's high over here. And then we have like disconnection or like flatlined people, like women who are like flatlined and they're like, maybe I need to let the pendulum go. And so what I see is like, especially over here, if you go into it okay, let's go over here. If you go into it from super shut down, it's honestly like you're flipping like a shamed, like being like kind of
Mm.
shamed and embarrassed and not enough and just like this like meek little victim to like big bad sexual activity kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you can easily swing over into like provocateur land, where then you go, oh my God, I'm finally free. Let's go play with kink and BDSM and polyamory and be a professional dominatrix and right.
And is
um,
that and is that even like where we go from like, say I feel as though there is some kind of current around this. So I would be curious because of how you're describing it. Like,
yeah.
is that even where that pendulum swings that way when we say, I'm heterosexual and now maybe I'm bisexual or now I just like, women, like, does that even kind of flow in that?
If you've been highly restricted, highly shamed, and have sort of a backlog of repressed desire, and you finally are like let loose. It's like why all like the Amish kids, when they have that opportunity to like go crazy, they like wreck their lives. It's because on the other side of shame is rebellion.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
The more of the experience that I have is not that with women, but women who come to me really like ready to feel more empowered and to feel just genuinely more confident overall in their lives and in the bedroom. And those definitely like the line is blurred.
Right. Yeah.
I'm more of my experience with clients is them saying, I feel really disconnected. I don't feel worthy. I have a hard time speaking up for my pleasure. I have a hard time telling my partner what I need, what I want. I don't even know what I need and want. And then them coming to me and saying, I had my first orgasm with my partner. What is the sorcery that you taught me? What is happening to my life? I feel like so emotional. I feel like there's access to my heart again. I feel like alive again. And it was, the performance element and like the hyper provocation around it is not there. It's more of like, oh my God, I have access to my heart again.
I would love to hear how you think that works, because that's been a huge, like, how do they go from pleasure to then heart centeredness? Like, what do you think that
Yeah.
is?
So I think, women have done a really good job of doing sex like men.
Yeah.
Right. And in that, we think that our pleasure is in climax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just from your perspective, where is our pleasure in sex?
Yeah, orgasm.
Like,
well, that's yeah.
So no, but or like, where do you?
Yeah, like what's the most gratifying part of having sex?
The connection.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think that's where. Can I just make a point too? Like where it like really clear. Like I think that's why. In like we want to feel climactic. We want to feel like enjoyed and satisfied and satiated. But a lot of times, like men don't understand why. Like if there isn't the orgasm, why like that it's okay for us. Like you know what I mean? And they're like, it's almost like it takes it out of them. Like they're so down about the fact that it couldn't occur for us. And I'm like, that's not even it's not a point. Like it's okay. Like now, if you never have it, like that's a whole, I'm sure you explore that too. But I think like I really noticed that like in general, where it's like, there's this thing that happens to men when it doesn't occur for a woman, and the woman doesn't feel that way about it.
Yeah, because that's masculine versus feminine. And I think, like one of the, I learned this from an awesome coach. He knows who he is. But like the goal orientation of the masculine is just it's Achilles heel.
Yeah.
They're always asking like, what do I get out of it? When do we peak? When do I get mine out of it? Right.
And when's the result? And can I see it and feel it? And like, is that like? And that's not really. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
also,
yeah.
I'm curious too, because you mentioned study of Kundalini, and historically, right, in the energy work of sex too, though, it's like the feminine feeds the masculine. So like on a physical level, but on a subconscious level, there is this give and take, right? So like we're not always aware of it, but the energy way, that's really what's happening. So like it's being expressed in one way, but like they're used to this, like the energy exchange is also something that's like very historically like has been this like mutual empowerment when you know how to wield it. But I think what's happening is
it's so good. Yeah, like the Kundalini or like the Tantra concept of like the energy around sexual exchange is like it is a current, right? And so one another. And where I think forgive me if this is slightly off topic. I want to make sure to address like the question, but this is what kind of came to mind is like women, we use sex as currency. Okay, so like this happens in like I'll give it over if he hits the bar or if he does enough for me. And so, yeah. And so, this is like, and it happens like in a compensatory way where like, if a man like, let's take like the old, like expectation of like, if a man pays for dinner, a woman should give it up. Okay. This is a very like masculine ideology. And so women have taken that on as like, well, he paid for dinner, so I have to give him sex. So I won't let him pay for dinner, so I don't have to give him sex. Does that make sense?
Yes.
When in reality, like, that's not true, right? But it's like an idea that has kind of come in and like infiltrated this idea of like, my sex is in exchange for something. Okay. And so we like block it off. And in that way, we lose ownership over our we lose sexual agency.
Yeah.
Is what, right? Because we always have an eye out for like, is he giving me enough for me to give him this thing back in exchange? And so it like cuts the current, right? Cuts each other off.
Yes.
So the reclaim for women is to practice more sexual agency, where we're not giving away our sex. Is where the concept of virginity comes in, and all of the religious programming that we have, that it's not something you can give to someone else or give away, but that it is always yours and you have choice over it always. Yeah.
And I think it's like, right, culturally, I look at this too, like it's what you're sharing is like so playing out in pop culture everywhere, where it's like, it's a tool. Like you said, it's a tool. So like, if I want to go into this one a little bit, but it's like, if I want to keep my husband, I need to give him sex all the time. And it's like, or if I need something or I want to get something or whatever, it's like, I do a sexual favor. And it's like, you know, that is such a reinforced undercurrent of like sexuality in our culture. And I think I've shared this on another podcast, or maybe I just shared it in a conversation. I think it was maybe with you, Katie. I was like, you know, where it's like, I am a Real Housewives junkie. I'm shifting out of that. So I'll say like, maybe I'm like transitional in that, but I have had a love for it. But I love to watch it from the reality perspective, the like catharsis of the drama, which I don't think have in my life, thank God. And also like, I have studied, you know, like gender and norms and conditioning and things of that sort. And so I sometimes look at it from like, honestly, like I'm kind of wearing like, I'm not a clinician anyway, but I'm like wearing it from a clinical hat or analytical hat, where I'm like, this is happening. And then we're reinforcing it and like picking and like looking at like how women are behaving almost, and perpetuating things that I don't think if somebody said to them like point blank, would you want this? And I don't think they realize it. But like, one of those pieces is like in Real Housewives of New York, they recasted this year. I got to go there because it's important to me. It really means something to me, like from that this actually occurred, is that in this, they recasted it. So it's all these younger women in different stages of life than has typically been. Okay. They're all badass. They're doing great things. Like it's amazing. And yet like there's this one narrative around this one woman who is Indian actually. And she had, you know, a tremendously difficult journey to having her twins, for example, like she did. And her twins are like 2 years old or turning 2. And so one, she was dealing with like the fact that she had to do IVF, and she did it hidden from her family because she was afraid that like they, you know, how she would be perceived and how her family would perceive that she couldn't even have child without this supportive process of IVF, right? So she was navigating cultural dynamics as well as just like being a woman, like in, you know, society today, and going through like really the emotional and physical like gravity, I guess, of going through IVF to have children. So then the narrative comes out, you know, she's not having sex with her husband. Like they haven't like bounced back after she had these children and her twins. And these other two castmates of hers, basically like the entire season as it was edited, like ream into her for like not having sex, making like innuendos, saying that her husband is probably cheating on her, like all of this horrific like behavior. And they were like, if I didn't give my husband then he would be out. He's out doing something else. And I was like, so first of all, like, we're talking about women empowerment, and you were like, literally, she's supposed to be your friend, quote unquote. And I'm like, you're blasting her on television. And think about also the message you're sending to women about like sex and sexuality.
Yeah.
And embodiment.
Yeah. This like modern concept of like women's empowerment is just rebranded patriarchy. It's rebranded.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's complete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just hit us with that. We're like, that's a
So,
whole other place. And important for it to be said here too.
and thank you for that Real Housewives recap. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I know. But it's like, it's so terrifying. It's terrifying. You know?
Also, you don't watch. Yeah. But no, the rebranded. Can we? Yeah. Say more. Can you say more about that? Because I think it's important. Like, and this is where, like, I'm in a situation right now. Like, like the way in which we do the same thing over and over again with a different under a different umbrella or in a different dynamic, and have convinced ourselves that it's like different. So I want to expand on what you just said, because you need to like rattle the cages here so that people can see.
Yeah. I mean, oh God, I don't know if I'm going to be as not tactful, but like as insightful or precise with my words when I'm talking about this, because I'm also discovering this in my own life as well. So I'm trying to like get the vocabulary around it to really let it land. But, it is, we're always like, it's another service of ego. We haven't put the infrastructure, and this is why I believe this work that I do with women is so important, because it reforms the way we connect.
Yeah.
And it's not through power and control.
Yeah.
And it's actually through vulnerability and that you have to grasp the understanding and have true belief that there is enough space for all of us. And that's hard. You're gonna, because most women will like, we hit the surface and we're like, you go girl, you go queen, and you work it, and you make that money and you get that bag. But the moment it feels threatening for us is when we default to patriarchal structures again, because they're easy, they're effective, and they are a master at making people feel inferior.
Yeah.
And you can do anything with somebody when they feel below you. You can manipulate them, you can, shame them, you can pretend with them, and like make them your little minion. And
Yeah.
so brand that, well, maybe call it female empowerment. Let's do that. But the moment someone feels really threatened is the moment you know that they've done the real baller shit. Like the soul crushing, dark, shadow work stuff that people can't, where I read this quote the other day that it was like, the amount of truth you can hold about yourself without running out of the room is the level in which you will grow. And 99.9% of people are like, this is hard, this is scary, goodbye. And they default to the surface female empowerment kind of crap again, which keeps us just doing the same thing over and over again, offshooting that fear, that threat of, oh my God, what if someone does something differently than what I believe, or threatens any kind of programming that I adhere to so strongly. This is the way that I do life. And if that thing is threatened, then I'm going to pierce it, I'm going to chop its head off, and I'm going to discard it as quickly as I can, because nothing is going to threaten my ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
Is this making sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I mean, I'm literally, everything you're saying is, I feel like divinely being channeled, because I'm in this, like, Orby knows right now, I'm in this chaotic experience of leaving this community that has a teacher. No.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I've been a part of them, is why I
Yeah,
know how to say this, okay? And you
yeah,
have to know, even in the, like, the culty stuff, this is where having a self-agency, having advocacy, being a sovereign person, a sovereign woman, where you can tell the difference between truth in your body and bullshit that people are feeding you, and say no,
yes, yes,
like,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
yes.
I've had to do it.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Well,
this is why your work, sorry to keep interrupting, but I do, and you can kind of come at it from different angles, but your work, and that where you're in, again, that embodiment piece and that heart-centered piece, like, I love the fact that you're like, yeah, like, go fuck around and find your heart. Like, it's like, get, like, have that, like, heart-centeredness is the key to this intuitive knowing in terms of what feels okay and not okay to you, and being able to see through all of the distortion that exists in this world, because there's a lot, it's a constant dance of, like,
It
and
is. I
knowing,
think the key here, and I'll call out Perry, because she's been such a fucking badass in my life to help. So Perry Chase is just a wonderful teacher. She teaches something very different than I do. And she is like the queen of energetics and truth and, like, feeling truth.
mm,
And her work is not easy, and it's not easy on the ego. It is very confronting work, and it will change the way you do business for the rest of your life,
yeah.
in every area of your life. And so I've spent some time in some of her programs that have changed that. And, like, she talks about distortion a lot. And so you have to be able to see and feel in your body and with your beautiful brain that you were given, because it doesn't all just
mhm,
happen in the body. If we were like, oh, like, the feminine is, like, in the body, and, like, I can
yeah,
feel truth in there. No, 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 no.
yeah,
This has
yeah,
to be an integrated system.
Right.
Because
yes,
Exactly.
yes, yes, yes,
that was like the goddessy kind of, like, rebrand.
Yes.
Like, that
yeah,
still keeps us disconnected from truth.
Yes.
yeah,
So the feminine power really is a full integration of mind, body, spirit, sexuality,
Right.
uh, where you can say, no, 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 no. This is
yeah,
like a rebrand. This is a repackage. I can feel the distortion.
mm,
And that is
yeah,
not what's fucking true. And there could be 30 people in the room going, you're not really getting it, are you? You're not feeling it. Can you feel the truth? And you're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, I'm good being alone. I'm
Yeah.
good, like, walking away and being the only one who's like, you guys are fucking crazy.
That's like Maggie's like in it. It's very in it. But like Maggie, I'm sure you're feeling that real hearing that
it's
really
perfect.
well right now, because it's like that's what you've
Yeah.
done. But I think that's like
Well,
really
I traded a romantic relationship for, like, this teacher relationship type of thing, right? Where, again, same shit, different look. Like, and that's exactly what you're saying of, like, how do you recognize that using your fucking brain that you do have, right? Without being told that everything you just said are things that I've just heard over the past couple of months. So it's like, oh, you're not getting it. You're too intellectual. Da, 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 da. I was just being told that, yeah. So,
and I think
you
I
learn the
love
lesson, and yeah.
yeah,
It's
go for
not,
it.
No,
Sorry,
you
go
learn the
ahead.
lesson into, yeah.
yeah, it's not a
But
new concept.
no,
No.
it's
But
not.
it's
And
like
it's, yeah.
it's the distortion and the discernment, which you mentioned earlier, right? So it's like first, it's like the recognition and the awareness of distortion occurring, which is like when you see when that integration is like off kilter, like it's the radar is going off, and you're like, okay, so that's like there's something distorted here. How do I? And then it's the discernment process of like really being able to say, okay, like placing it somewhere and understanding and examining that further. And I think the other part of like, so I really wanted to comment about the patriarchy piece, because it's like this is when I talk about liberatory leadership, because I'm like, liberation is key for the systems of the future that don't exist today. And the scariest part is that because we can't envision those future models, that we don't try right now. Right. And so like, that's like the feminist, like whatever, the 18th wave of feminism needs to be that we are like unafraid.
Yeah.
And that means like that we are unafraid to say, we have no idea how to do this, but I will not resort to the current system, right? I will not live under that conditioning of doing it that way. And that's kind of like the very fearful, but the root of a liberated leader, or the root of liberation, is the heart-centeredness, right?
Yeah.
The ability
to be like a huge power construct there. We talk about like a matriarchal society and what that might look like, and how our value systems would be so vastly different, and how we would operate with organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like you talk about like the 18th wave of feminism, like we still haven't quite gotten it yet, because this rebrand of feminism that we experienced with our mothers really didn't get it, because half of them were just doing feminism like men would, like, I'm better than you, which the pendulum had to swing. Okay. Now all these women are doing basically the same thing with their bodies through embodiment work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sensual tantra goddess. I'm like, we're gonna, and we do a really good job of the presentation, but it's still another fucking way to encourage women to disconnect from the truth.
So, and the way I'm hearing it in the language, because of like literally being in that work, I feel like is like, so you are saying, and I think aptly so, like, but it's like, it's performative again. Like we are becoming performative again. And so and right, like obviously feminism, one of the biggest things that we experience, and why it was still under patriarchal, and I'll say white patriarchal, like conditioning, was that it didn't even include BIPOC. Like it didn't include communities that were not white. And so like that becomes a stretch, right? Of like the whole thing. And the other thing I want to say in like the feminine and masculine integration, which is essential, that yin and yang, like yin is not yang, yin does not exist without yang, and yang does, like that is what we're talking about in that integration.
Yep.
And I don't know, call it harmony, balance. I know people have like their own issues with like what those words, but it's like, I think integration is the right one. I land on that with you as well.
I do too. The word integration is fantastic. Yeah.
But I would say like, if people examine, and this is again, like without it being like one specific person, I want to like always mention it, is like when you examine the toxic traits of white supremacy culture that are pervasive in American culture, you will see things like, we need to be results oriented, and it needs to be black and white. You will see things like urgency, which abstains from patience. Like it says, we cannot come to that through a process, that we must know it now and instantly. So when we look at the way programs and the way that things support people in getting to liberation, a lot of them are instant gratification moments, and they have a sense of urgency, where we know some of the work is not of integration, takes long periods of time. It is messy. It can be dark. It can be filled with light. It can be up and down, forward, backward. Like there's not the linearity around it. And that it's like that in and of itself is like, when we can't have that discernment or understand that lens of distortion, when we are hearing programmatically someone saying, do these things, and like, are you check, are you moving along that space? It's like that in and of itself is like the deep conditioning that we are under. Like people, you don't even see that.
One of the places where I see that like urgency and that desperation, like move it along, is in the superiority to men. That feel, right. And so like I just did this video that went absolutely viral on TikTok. I'm like a 200-300 view video kind of gal. And so I was like prepared for it, but I was like not prepared for it. Kind of like I have the infrastructure and I have everything in the back end of my business to support that level of influx. But what I really want to get to is like the number of women who, so the video was all about like when you've been accustomed to being in a relationship with men who can't meet your needs, the ones who are emotionally available will give you the ick. And it quickly devolved into every man gives me the ick. I can't trust anyone. Men suck. And I was like, this is definitely not the coaching that I do, is to collude about how horrible men are ever. Okay. Have we been hurt? Yup. Have we been horribly disappointed? Yup. Have our fathers abandoned us? Yup. But it's my responsibility to come into the neutrality of I get agency over myself now, and I get to integrate, and I get to take responsibility for, it's okay if we're messy. It's okay if we're messy for another 40 generations. That's okay. We are perfectly where we are. We are all working at the integration process. And if I go about, what kind of coach would I be if I was like, yep, yeah, tell me, sister, that's female empowerment. Yeah, tell me about that man of yours. Like, yeah, you queen. No.
Right.
Stop that shit right now. Right? That's the stuff. And so and I think people can feel that for me. I think from the outside, I've had men be like, oh, so you hate all men. I'm like, you need to pay attention. Pay attention. Listen, this is not what this is about.
Yeah.
It's so much harder to sit with the neutrality and learn the integration process. And this is relationship.
Yeah.
Right? That's relationship, is feeling that middle ground as we progress. So I don't know if that kind of like added
it does.
Oh, we have so many things we need to like do. We keep saying on every episode, we're like, we need to just do a repeat series. So maybe like next season is just everybody again. Repeat the cycle of like every single guest, because there's so much to dive into. And I think you have offered so many access points for us to just consider. I know there's a lot of insight for me, and also like you've brought me back to places where I needed to like, kind of think about and look at. And I know that that's definitely something that's going to move forward through this episode for others as well. Is there anything that we might have promised, one, because we said we want to talk about these things, that you were like super eager to chat about and we just never got to it? Or is there anything that you want to mention that you're like, this is like so important to my message?
I feel like we touched on a lot. I think the most important thing is like sexuality is not everything that I teach. It is such an important part of our womanhood and of our sovereign womanhood that's sort of like it's a piece of the pie that has been taken out of the equation of our wholeness. Right. And so that's why I address it, because it deeply affects who we are as women, and it prevents us from full sovereignty. Right. If we're afraid of our pussies, if we can't say that word, if we're afraid of sex or talking about orgasm or pleasure, of course, in the right audience in certain constructs. But if we're afraid to like look at ourselves and like be with ourselves, like that's something we definitely need to work on. But I will say like the majority of my work with women is in the area of recovering your self-worth, recovering from, there's a piece here about addiction. I will also say, we all have our drugs of choice, we should say, even if that's self-deprecation. And recovering your life. This is what I work on with women, is recovering your life to be a life worth living. Doing relationships with dignity, with a high level of self-respect, with standards, and learning to be an advocate for yourself. And that's in every area of your life. So yes, we talked about sex today, but this is coaching for every woman who's ready to up-level her life, to feel more sovereign in her energy, to feel more confident, to have more vocabulary around what she wants, and to hold herself in high fucking regard. You deserve that. We deserve that. We've had centuries of feeling not good enough and it's time to really like live a beautiful life. And it moves far past sexuality. So
Yeah.
there's,
Mm.
yeah.
And I often like refer to the concept that I find like my work is grounded in, but I hear you saying it too, which is like Ubuntu, which comes from like an African language, which says like I am because you are. And I
Mhm.
think when we are our best selves, which you're speaking to of like the wholeness, like this is a part of our wholeness, we can hold that space greater for others to be themselves as well. And so it's like what a ripple effect, what a way to change this world and make it easier for us to like not have be ego led but be heart centered, as we've talked about here, and like just show up completely authentically and in the way we want to, and have deep and radical acceptance for one another. So
I
thank you
love
for the work.
Yeah, thank you. And like I'm doing it along with you. Don't put me on a pedestal. I like I know my shit and I'm a great coach, but also I'm doing this with you. I struggle
Yeah.
with and am like have the courage to face, oh shit, there's my ego that's coming in again. Or I work with a therapist. I have coaches. Like that is it's okay for me
Yeah.
to like do it along with my clients. And so yeah, it's beautiful work. It'll change your life.
Thank
Yeah.
you. So we love to ask, what are you noticing today or right now?
Oh my God. Um, that so much, so much. Today is a beautiful day, and I think I'm noticing the commitment that we have to ourselves is the one that everyone else responds to. That is like number one. Yeah, like just staying committed to yourself when there's no one there, staying committed to yourself when you're lonely, when you're in a breakup, when there's no one to validate you or hug at night or tell you you're doing a good job. The tenacity and the bravery it takes to continue to stay with yourself and not self abandon is the root of every other relationship you'll have. And so I'm noticing that today, like I was telling Orphe, like, or who was I telling? Yeah, I was telling you guys, like the person that I was on Tuesday night compared to the woman that I was on Wednesday morning are like two different people, and it's because I stayed really committed to myself. I will always stay committed to myself, no matter who is in my life, and no matter who comes and goes, no matter who disappoints me, no matter who ghosts, no matter who shows up or doesn't or supports me or not. And I want every woman to also have that backbone about her is that like no matter what happens, I have me. I will never leave her. Ugh, like it's so powerful.
Yes, I
Yeah,
receive
Mm.
that. I'm like, that is a
I
powerful
know.
yeah,
and a powerful notice.
yeah,
I
yeah.
know.
Not to put judgment on it, but or
Yeah,
evaluation, but
Thank
it's so
you.
moving.
tell it to yourself. I will never leave.
Yeah.
I will never leave
Yeah.
you. Right?
Mm,
Yeah.
What a
Yeah.
powerful information.
yes. If I had a foghorn, I would
Thank
be like, "Beep,
you.
beep, beep, beep," you know,
Ah,
I'll just use my mouth.
so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Like,
Thank you. That was really beautiful. Thank you.
how
Yeah.
can people, where can they meet you if they want to connect?
Well, so I live in Los Angeles, but I do work virtually with all of my clients. You can reach me on Instagram at Katie H Coaching. Same thing on TikTok, Katie H Coaching, unless the government shuts it down, please. This is how single moms are making their careers happen. Katie H Coaching. I'm Coach Katie is my handle. And then my website is katiehenrickscoaching.com. I have a ton of different offers, anything from like a free boundaries course to Boudoir that just started, which is all about feminine sensuality and coming into your self-worth through the art of curating your bedroom space.
Mm.
I have a body image reboot 5-day challenge that I'm about to launch, and then I have I have a recovery course coming up. So there's a million ways to work with me. I do one-on-one a la carte sessions, which are like just one-off coaching sessions, and then I offer packages as well. You can find all of my information on those 3 places.
Amazing. And all of that will, of course, be linked here so that you don't have to remember it. You can just click. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Katie, for being in conversation with us today. It has been truly expansive for myself, I know. And I think, Maggie, you too, but I'll let you comment.
Yes, it's a beautiful conversation, and it's the conversation I needed to hear today. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.